All right, so I was digging through some more of the prototype maps, and I was looking at some of the encounter rates on some of the Pokemon, and I think we came across something else very interesting. Apparently, as far as the legendary birds go, again, that being Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno, they actually weren't actually stationed legendaries at one point. Kind of like Mewtwo, like the Silphco League. After you beat it, you were able to go and find like a roaming Mewtwo, but I think there was only one Mewtwo you could catch, so there wouldn't be... it would have made an exception for Mewtwo. But what's really interesting is, as far as the legendary birds themselves go, it kind of made sense because you actually fought like Giovanni at one point, and he actually had his Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno, and some of the, if you actually were to fight him in the Sylph League, where, he was actually a flying type gym leader, as well as not when you fight him for the Earth badge, or the, but you would actually fight him for, it's like a rematch after the first 3 times you fight him. So it's really interesting because, like, according to the Pokemon Blue data, and mind you, Pokemon Blue came out, it was like the 1.1 version of Pokemon, the original Gen 1. But in Japan, Pokemon Green and Red were the very first ones. I think Green came out first and then Red, but it was kind of the same thing, really. But this is all data that was probably found within the game's coding that either they didn't finish or it was saved like in their eternal database, but they decided to cut back on it because of cartridge limitations. Because you got to understand, Pokemon Gen 1 was just a bunch of updated versions. Sure, they changed some stuff, but basically, Pokemon went through a lot of changes due to cartridge limitations, and it was a big deal at the time because there wasn't really much they could have done about it, because Pokemon, I think even in Gen 1, the cartridges on a Game Boy were basically like a half of a megabyte, and that was saying something back in the day. I mean, of course, nowadays that's not a big deal because, we way surpassed that in the last 30 years, but, for a handheld cartridge, it was really impressive that they wanted to do that back in the day. And Satoshi Tajiri himself was just really in love with what he did, so... a lot of dedication and motivation. There you go. Now he has all these ideas that, they came up with. So basically, this is what I've concluded. So Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno could be caught in their original locations, but there was more than one of them. And they were just super rare to find, and also probably really hard to catch, but you could catch, like, in theory, more than one Zapdos, more than one Articuno, more than one Moltres, depending on what room you were going to. Kind of like, like a typical RPG. You go to a different room, there's different encounter rates. There's different Pokemon you can catch. Looking for something specific, then you'd go on the internet and look at the floor designs and all that. And so they kind of had it. But what they ended up changing, and I mean, some people would probably argue they probably like this idea better because it really stands out a lot better. In exchange for only catching one per file, one of each per file. You went and found, you would go into a dungeon, and then somewhere in that dungeon, usually at the end of it, there would be a legendary Pokemon that, assuming you're in the right cave at least, or at the end of like a flower plant, for example, where Zapdos reside. And then, you'd save in front of it, it'd have its own sprite, and you interact with it, you start a fight with it, and then, the low catch rate battle begins because, legendary Pokemon are never easy to catch. Unless you can get timer balls, not in Gen 1, of course, but in Gen 3. That's when I think they really started making it easier to catch legendaries, if you could get your hands on those balls. Because timer balls were really useful. Especially if you knew how to draw the battle out for as long as possible. And then you could, like that ×4 multiplier just really helps a lot. But anyways, so yeah, it's really interesting to think that, they sort of had like different like concepts that they would later recycle into later the series, and it really does make you wonder, like, you can really see how much different the series could have been thanks to that opportunity. And it really does make you wonder, like, if maybe that's what that's probably where they got the idea for roaming legendaries in a way. Legendary Pokemon maybe they weren't necessarily legendaries at one point. Maybe they were just really hard to find Pokemon, and that's why they called them legendary. So the difference between, like, because every time you catch a legendary bird, it says this is a legendary bird, and and then it gives a description about it. But it's interesting to think that for the very first legendaries, they really did have a lot of interesting ideas for its time. Like Moltres was actually caught in a different location. Mewtwo was actually in a different location. So was Articuno was in another deeper dungeon, and Zapdos was still at the power plant. But it is interesting to think like how different the series could have very well have been if they would have kept that still the same, and how much different. Because if you can find this stuff in like Pokemon Blue, makes you wonder what you could have found in like Pokemon Green and let's say Red as well, like the later versions where or the earliest versions you could find in the prototype data, or a scrapped concept that was just leftover data built on the same physics engine. So again, if I find more stuff, I'll make more videos. But it's kind of interesting to think about, Imagine being able to catch more than one Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno. I'm not sure about Mewtwo and Mew, because of course, Mewtwo, they did state there was only one Mewtwo. And that was basically it. But as far as Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno, you could basically see like, hey, if Giovanni could catch them, then, I should be able to catch them too, So yeah, hopefully this explains a lot. But, again, subscribe if you're not already. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers. If I find more content again, I'll just keep making it, because I think this stuff's interesting. A lot of people played Pokemon more than once, but a lot of people didn't really think about this stuff. Usually because we didn't really have hard evidence to really compare it to like the final version of the games. And it really does make you wonder, how much different the series could have been if they decided to keep what they decided with the series.